The Russian Navy is on maneuvers in the Mediterranean. Our warships are just off the coast of Lebanon. It seems that Russia is rearming Syria. That's the title of an article for this month's Prophecy in the News magazine. Gary Stearman has written it. Bible prophecy on track. Russian-Syrian deal is sealed. Gary has the story.
And JR, the backstory is this. Russia is back. Nationalist Russia is getting bigger and more powerful every day. They are arming the various parties in the Mideast. Aaron Klein of WorldNet Daily writes a sentence here, which I want to quote because, JR, this is a mouthful. This is in an article that we have in our magazine. Klein says, according to Israeli and Jordanian officials, Syria recently quietly struck a deal with Russia that allows Moscow to station submarines and warboats off Syrian ports. In exchange, Russia is supplying Syria with weaponry at lower costs, with some of the missiles and rockets being financed by Iran. So talk about the marketplace. This is the marketplace. Some of the cost of supplying Syria is being defrayed by Iran. So you have here a triangle of power: Iran, Syria, Russia. And they're all working together to set up a strategic war plan. JR, this is right out of the Bible.
Now, what's happening in Russia anyway? Putin seems to have been a friend to George Bush. We have Russian cosmonauts on the International Space Station.
Why, yes.
We have Putin leaving office and turning things over to a friend.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening in Russia?
JR, what's happening in Russia is akin to, I think, what happened in Germany prior to World War II. If you recall, Germany was in a horrendous financial crisis. Hitler arose as a kind of a hero to the German people and said, I can reestablish the German economy. 2 chickens in every pot, 2 cars in every garage. Just follow me and I'll fix it for you. Vladimir Putin is doing exactly the same thing in Russia. Now, Russia is, I think, in its post-Western guise right now. For a long time, Russia was a friend of the West. The free market reigned. But that's all been closed down. The Russian economy has been in shambles, and Putin has stood up as the hero. And in fact, he pictures himself as the hero who can reestablish the Russian economy.
In fact, they've done that, haven't they?
They have.
Especially with oil prices the way they are, the Russian economy is booming today.
Absolutely. And out of this has come Putin's desire to do what Peter the Great wanted to do a couple, 3 centuries ago. Peter the Great wanted Russia to have southern flank, deep water, warm weather seaports. And he had his eye on the Persian Gulf, and he had his eye on the Mediterranean Sea. And that old dream to have southern seaports has never died.
It's still alive, isn't it?
Still alive.
Amazing. So Syria is rearming itself. In fact, according to this article, they have over 100 rockets they could fire into Israel every hour for a sustained period of time. Mm-hmm. Picking off every major Israeli city.
Right.
That's amazing.
Now, these are not the old hat rockets of the past. Do you remember the Scuds that hit Israel? These were notoriously unpredictable. Mm-hmm. They didn't have good guidance systems. Half of them misfired, and no Scud really ever hit its target. You remember the 39 Scuds?
Yes.
Well, JR, the new Scuds, the D model Scud, now has sophisticated guidance. It has better engines. It's been improved vastly. Every inch of Israel could be targeted by one of the new Scud D missiles.
You've written another article entitled Gog's Navy. Mm-hmm. You said, since the beginning of 2008, Russia has begun to escalate its military presence in the Mediterranean Sea. Tell us about it.
Well, they have exercises going on. Back in January, they started a 71-day exercise period. Now, why they gave it a 71-day time limit, I'll never know. But these deep water exercises in the Mediterranean are focused on two Syrian seaports. Latakia is one of them. Tartus is the other one. And those two deep water seaports, JR, can arm the Middle East. Let me explain. There are railroads, very advanced railway systems that run out of both of those deep water seaports at Latakia and Tartus. Those railways run down to Damascus, they run across to Baghdad, and they have spurs that run off to several major supply areas. So the Russians can bring in armaments, war materials to those two deep water seaports, and in just a couple days, they'll be disseminated throughout Syria and even as far as Iraq. The Russians now are protecting those deep water seaports with fleet exercises, including, and we'll talk about this just a minute, some espionage at sea that's very interesting.
The reason this is important is because Isaiah chapter 17 talks about Syria being destroyed someday. We do not know exactly when, but we feel that it may be very near. Isaiah writes, "The burden of Damascus, behold, Damascus is taken away from being a city, and it shall be a ruinous heap." It goes on then in the chapter to describe what leads up to what we think will be the battle of Gog and Magog. That's Isaiah chapter 17. And Israel is going to be blamed for it. It says in verse 4, "The glory of Jacob shall be made thin," indicating that Israel is going to be blamed for the demise of Damascus. And so we have this Damascus effort to rearm. In fact, there's a WorldNet Daily article I have here that says Syria intensely arming itself. Rockets, missiles place all of Israel within firing zone. And it goes on to say, Syria is in the midst of intensely arming itself, placing into position rockets and missiles capable of striking the entire Jewish state. Amazing. The things that are going on today, leading up to the possibility that biblical prophecy could be fulfilled within a short period of time.
JR, this is a description of part of the military exercise at sea that Russia is currently conducting, even as we make this program. Air carrier Admiral Kuznetsov is on current missions in the Mediterranean, escorted by 4 ships, including a large anti-submarine vessel, the Admiral Levchenko, and the command and supply ship Sergei Osipov. On its decks are 47 Su-33 fighter bombers, 10 helicopters. This is just one of the boats in the exercise. Now guess where the fighter bombers and helicopters are going. They are going to the port of Latakia. They'll be offloaded there, and the Syrians will be able to use them. These are Su-33 fighter bombers, very advanced late model Russian fighter bombers. That's part of the exercise, just a small part of it. And amazing. The gentleman, shall we call him, who replaced Putin, who was recently forced to step down because his term limit came to an end, Dmitry Medvedev. Remember that word. Now that's hard for us Americans to pronounce. Dmitry Medvedev, President Vladimir Putin's successor, said this on January the 11th, and he spoke to a full assembly in Russia. He said, Russia must restore sea power. The Soviet Union's naval might commanded respect. He says, I won't say it commanded fear, it commanded respect. Well, JR, he wants the new Soviet Navy to command fear. And he said that to the assembled audience. He wants that new deep water, that blue water Navy of Russia to be able to challenge the American Navy.
Wow.
This is fascinating because in a February 25th report, a Russian Amur-class PM-138 naval boat, part of this exercise we're talking about, was caught in a storm. And the storm forced this ship off course. This was in February. late February. This ship was forced off course, which caused it to have to be rescued. It called and sent up a distress signal. And alongside came American ships, some ships of other nationalities to help out in the brotherhood of the sea, so to speak. Well, they came in time to help the ship out of its distress. They were ready to offload crew and so forth. And guess what? This turned out to be a Russian electronic espionage boat that had scores of antennas, all kinds of the latest and greatest equipment to pick up Israeli communications and to relay those Israeli communications to the Russians and the Syrians. Full-scale espionage going on offshore, off of Israel's shores, conducted by the Russians, and a storm at sea caused this ship to be discovered. Little coincidence going on there. Who controls the waters?
How about that? Well, here's an article about the U.S. Navy ships moved closer to Lebanon. Talks about the USS Cole and how it is being joined by a fleet of other ships. And it looks like that we are there to protect the election in Lebanon. You see, Lebanon's been without a prime minister since, what, December? Mm-hmm. And the parliament doesn't want to bring it to a vote. They're having political problems. And
Indeed.
So there is an interim prime minister right now, but he may or may not become the permanent one. Tell us about that, Jerry.
Well, part of this whole operation is that the current prime minister, Fuad Signora, is pro-Western. He is, I guess, the last of a long chain of the Lebanese leaders who were pro-Western. They have been assassinated. They've been hounded out of office. They have been through several wars. They have tried very hard to establish a stable pro-Western Lebanese government. The forces to the east, namely Syria and especially the Soviet Union, or shall we say Russia now, do not want this to happen. So there's a quiet contest going on. Hezbollah is arming Beirut. Syria is arming Hezbollah. Iran is arming Hezbollah. And there is word that when their power arrives at a certain level, and think of this, JR, you have Hezbollah developing forces in southern Lebanon, you have the Russian Navy coming into the ports of Tartus and Latakia. So from both directions, you have the enemies of the Signora government building up their strength day by day by day. And this Debka file describes a ploy to undermine the Signora government.
In fact, Syria claims that Prime Minister Signora is an Israeli agent.
Yes.
And they claim to have even named his controller, his Israeli controller.
Israeli controller, which may or may not be true.
Yes.
It's total confabulation, probably.
Probably, but because he is pro-Western, they want to get rid of him. And so they have concocted this idea that he is an Israeli Mossad agent running Syria. I'm sorry, running Lebanon.
Running Lebanon.
Beirut, Lebanon. This is crazy.
Now, we've thrown a lot of facts at you here in the last few minutes, but just remember one thing. Out of all of these facts and figures comes one salient and important point, and that is that Lebanon is a prize. It's being eyed by several factions right now. It is the prize, and it finds itself right in the middle of a battle for power in the region. If Lebanon should fall into the hands of the Syrians and the Russians, JR, that is the setup for the big war.
We know a big war is coming. We know that Russia will get involved. First, I think Syria will have its war with Israel, be destroyed, and then Russia and Iran will get involved. Ezekiel chapter 38, that's the battle of Gog and Magog. Are we that close? Are we that close in the fulfillment of prophecy? I want you to know that even the rabbis are claiming now that we live in the days just prior to the Messianic era. and all of these wonderful events that the biblical prophets said would come to pass are developing today. I don't know how long it will take, but my, it shouldn't be very long, Gary, until we see a break in this thing.
It can't be long because the words frenzy have been used concerning frenzy and hysterical. Words like that have been used to describe what's going on in Lebanon today. And in Syria, the Syrians are said to be frenetically rearming themselves. Now, the Russians are rearming the Syrians. Listen to what the Russians are doing. They're doing three things for the Syrians. First, they are modernizing Syrian anti-aircraft capabilities, radar-guided surface-to-air missiles. They have been providing Syria the S-300, which is considered as advanced as the Israeli Arrow and as advanced as U.S. surface-to-air missiles, which means that another hit on Syria, such as the one last year where we took out a nuclear facility, can't happen, not with the S-300 missile in place. Secondly, the Russians are giving the Syrians new anti-tank technology. This new anti-tank technology is laser-guided. It uses the latest high-tech developments, a lot of them scavenged from the West in the free market, shall we say. There are a lot of war secrets stolen and marketed through China and other sources. They get back to Russia. Russia includes them in their latest materials, their latest war materials, and presto, they're on the market. This new anti-tank missile could absolutely neutralize the Israeli Merkava, so it is said. Thirdly, the Russians have made secret deals, and those secret deals are now signed, sealed, and delivered, giving the Syrians new ballistic missile technology. We talked about the Scud-D missile a minute ago. They're also supplying Syria with the Scud-B, which is a slightly different type of missile that uses a different guidance system and can come in along a slightly different trajectory, so I have read, making it harder to stop if you're using both of these in combination. Well, the Russians are supplying Scud-B and D missiles to Syria. Those have a range of about 250 miles, which would easily put all of Israel in danger. These missiles can be outfitted with chemical and biological warheads. Even tactical field-grade nuclear warheads could be fitted to them, although nobody is saying that right now. Those are the three things the Russians are doing for the Syrians.
Wow. Now, if you want to get the story on Russia rearming Syria, get this article in our March 2008 edition of Prophecy in the News magazine.
JR, we read the backstories. We sort of skulk about in the dark corners of the news media to find these little bits and pieces that are of great prophetic interest. We cull them out, we write them up so that you can, in just one easy read, you can have access to all of these mostly hidden facts because, JR, these things flatly do not appear in the Western media. For the most part, they're ignored as if they didn't even exist. It's ridiculous. I wanted to bring up a subject, unless you have something that you wanted to say.
Go ahead.
And that's this. When we look at Isaiah 17, the burden of Damascus, how Damascus is going to be flattened at a certain point in time, as you read down into Isaiah 17, you read about an invasion that takes place. Starting in verse 12, woe to the multitude of many people which make a noise like the noise of the sea, and to the rushing of nations that make a rushing like the rushing of mighty waters. The nations shall rush like the rushing of mighty waters. And this is apparently a 24-hour invasion of the Middle East that is described by Isaiah. And we've talked about this rushing in the past in terms of an aerial envelopment. Planes coming in, maybe with paratroops and so forth. But I want to suggest something else. What else makes a rushing noise like the rushing of many waters? Several 20, 30, 40 Scud B and D missiles roaring into the sky at once would make a noise like the rushing of mighty waters. And I just want to suggest that maybe Isaiah was depicting an aerial envelopment by missile.
Yeah.
What do you think?
It's entirely possible. But Gary, do you remember Daniel 9:26? The end thereof shall be with the flood.
With a flood. That's right.
Here we've got this sounding like the rushing of mighty waters. So
Yeah.
I don't know. A bomb off the shore could cause a tidal wave to come inland.
Absolutely.
With great fury. And so things are really, there's a powder keg in the Middle East, and it's ready to explode. You remember a few weeks ago there was an assassination in Damascus? One of Iran's top terror tacticians, Ahmad Mughniya, was assassinated with a car bomb. And nobody knows really who did it. Now Syria is saying it's our Lebanese enemies. And Iran is saying it's the Israeli Mossad. So nobody really knows who did it. Israel isn't saying, but the man is dead, and they are in a turmoil now. In fact, this article that I have from the Debka file says Iran and Israel poised for possible military clash over Mughniya's death. So it looks like Iran is threatening Israel.
They're spoiling for a fight. In fact, as we have discussed this article, JR and I, it almost seems that Iran is looking for any excuse to enter the fray. No matter how paper thin the facts, they will use that as an excuse to exert their authority over in Lebanon. Again, watch the papers, folks. Watch Lebanon. It has become a crucial bone of contention, and I think it's going to steer the course of events in the next 3 or 4 months in the region.
In fact, Hezbollah has announced that it has placed 50,000 of its members on the ready for any eventuality, i.e. directives from Tehran. Personnel at the U.S. Embassy and other institutions in Beirut were ordered to be on their guard for attacks, keep a low profile, and refrain from using their cell phones. So things are really tense over there. Then we have Damascus seizes on Mughniya's killing for Lebanon comeback. You see, Syria wants to use this as an excuse to invade Lebanon.
Yes.
And to get back into Lebanon. Syria was driven out, asked to leave, unkindly so, a few years ago. Syria wants back in Lebanon. So this may be their ticket to get back in.
However you slice it, the Bible is so accurate. The Bible speaks of sea battles. It speaks of battles for territorial development concerning Syria, concerning Jordan. We haven't even mentioned Jordan. Jordan, JR, that's another program. It is arming itself at a rapid rate and expecting some rather dire things to happen in the future.
Yes, and you recall recently the 8 yeshiva students that were massacred in Jerusalem. Well, here's an article that says that there are leads to Hamas, Damascus, Hezbollah, or both in Jerusalem student murders. So it looks like that the Hamas and the Hezbollah triggered the activity of this terrorist to go and do this. And by the way, 4 days before that massacre, there were a couple of Arabs tried to get into another school, and they were stopped at the door by security guards. And they had a box very similar to the one this man brought his guns and ammunition in. They claimed that they were there to do some work inside. But when the guards at the door said, "Let's see what's in the box," then they said, "Well, we're going to go back and get some tools." And they went back to the truck and left. And of course, it was reported to the police in Israel, Gary, but the police said, well, it was just a misunderstanding. So they didn't think anything of it. 4 days later, 8 yeshiva students are killed.
Wow.
And by the way, guess who killed this terrorist in the yeshiva? One of the students. had a gun.
Mm.
That'll stop the campus killings, wouldn't it?
It would.
Well, there's a lot to say, but we're out of time. This is J.R. Church and Gary Stimmen. Until next time, keep looking up.